We are committed to creating a safe and supportive space for our guests and listeners, and to provide information and tools that will help our listeners understand, manage, and overcome trauma. We understand that the healing journey can bring up challenging emotions. Therefore, we want to warn our audience that certain episodes may contain discussions or stories that could be triggering for some individuals. The content of the podcast is for educational and informative purposes only, and we encourage you to practice self-care and discretion while listening, and to reach out to a trusted support system or professional if you feel overwhelmed and need help on your healing journey. Welcome, Susan, and thank you for being here to share your story and, most importantly, your story of healing.
Oh, thank you for having me. I appreciate your time.
So your book, The Other Side of the Gun, you're going to share your story about that. And the thing that I really like is that you're going to be sharing, most importantly, the transition from victimhood, because those of us that have had stuff that happened in our childhood, where we were definitely in victimhood. So you're going to transitioning from victimhood into survivor mentality. So there's a lot of hope there, and your story is pretty powerful. So tell us about you.
Well, um, I started out as a pretty normal teenager, except for I had a cop for a father. And that was always, you got razzed a little bit when you were young, and as I got into the teenage world, he became more of like a protector for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he was an amazing dad. He was just a fantastic father. He was very present and my best friend, really. And so I had kind of since he was a detective, he was a Los Angeles police detective. And when he was like a beat cop, I was always worried about him,
Mm-hmm.
but not in a sense of like something really bad would happen. I always thought, well, dad can get hurt on the job. Um, when I became a detective, I was a little bit older and I kind of had a false sense of security.
Mm. How's
I
that?
thought because he was on a desk job
Uh,
that he was safer. And all of that came crashing down um, on Halloween night of 1985. Um, I was getting ready to go to a party, or I was hoping to go to a party. It was a school night. So dad and I had had some words that morning around this party. But I was bound and determined because, teenagers are like that sometimes.
and you're
And
17 at this point, right?
I'm
You were seven.
17. Yep,
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Tough age.
17.
Mm-hmm.
Tough age, and a little bit stubborn. I was a little bit stubborn. And so I was home. My mom had just gotten home from work and she was still in her costume and was proceeding to take her costume off when the phone rang. And being a teenager, you always think that anytime the phone rings, it's for you.
Yep, I
So,
remember those days.
like, who's going to call my parents, right?
Right, right.
Um, so I ran to the phone and picked it up, and it wasn't for me. It was a lady from my brother's school. Now, I had a brother that was 6 years old at the time. And this woman called and she said that there was a drive-by shooting and my dad was involved, but no other information. So I quickly got my mom and handed the phone to her. And she picked up the phone, and I could see as she was talking to this woman, I could kindly barely hear the conversation, but I watched my mom's demeanor change and her posture change, and I knew it was bad. And she got off the phone, she looked at me and said, "We're going to the school." So we jumped in the car. The school is about 5 to 7 minutes from my childhood home, and didn't speak a word to each other on our way there. And the whole time I just had this gut feeling that it was bad, but I didn't realize what I was about to embark on. So when we got to the school, the parking lot is kind of in the middle, and the kids got picked up on the backside of the school. And so my mom and I got out of the car and we started to run walk towards that area and spotted my dad's truck. So we made a beeline for the truck. And as we were doing that, I saw police officers walking around and they had tears in their eyes. And an ambulance was sitting there with the lights on. And we rounded the corner, and that's when we saw my dad's body and the aftermath. And I watched my mom kind of drop to her knees, and a police officer was trying to hold her back. And as I was sitting there or standing there, I was just, you know, it's like you're watching a movie and you're just totally in shock, and confused. I mean, I was a kid, so I was just confused as to what I was actually seeing. And my brain just started racing at that point, like, where's my brother? What, why is this ambulance here? Why isn't anybody doing anything about this? Right? Why isn't anybody helping him? And we got escorted into an office, and that's when my mom was kind of taken aside, I'm assuming by detectives, the police. And as I was sitting in the office, I couldn't comprehend what I had saw. And I was still in that mentality of there's an ambulance and why isn't someone helping him?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until I heard two women speaking in the office, and the one said to the other one that, Mr. Williams is deceased. And that's when it snapped in my head. And I wanted to run from that
Mm-hmm.
office, and I wanted to keep running. Like, you know, Forrest Gump had something, right? I wanted to run and
Mm-hmm.
run and run. However, my body was not allowing that. I was completely paralyzed in that chair and couldn't move. My mom came up to me and she said, I'm sending you with a neighbor. And even though part of me wanted to stay or wanted to leave, wanted to run, wanted to get out of
Mm-hmm.
there, the other part of me was I wanted to stay with my family unit. Like I wanted to be with my mom and my brother. I, I wanted some sense of security,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't get it. So I did go with the neighbor who had known my parents for a really long time. And so my neighbor lady, she was just trying to wrap her head around this news
Mm-hmm.
herself. And I was beyond hysterical. I was completely out of control as far as like my emotions. I was all over the place, which happens,
Yeah, it's
you know,
understandable.
it happens. And I was a kid,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a boyfriend at the time who I'm married to now, but I begged her to call him at work, and he was 19 at the time. And so she did. She called him at work, and when she talked to him, she didn't give him a whole lot of information. So when he showed up at her house, he was in the mentality that he was going to take me to a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he showed up, he was like, grab your coat, let's go. What hospital is he at? Where's your mom? Where's your brother? Like asking me all these questions. The words could not come out of my mouth. I just couldn't say it. If I said it, it was real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And finally, I just blurted it out. He's gone. And my boyfriend was like, what do you mean he's gone? And I said, he's gone. He's not coming back. He's gone. And it was the first time I ever saw my husband drop to his knees.
Mm.
Um, he was devastated. We'd only been dating 3 months, and he got to know my dad. And so this was very traumatic for him.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we neither one of us knew how to navigate all of this.
Yeah,
You
there's not an
know,
outline for you.
there isn't. There's not a
Mm-mm.
book. There's not a,
A manual.
no manual.
Mm-mm.
And understand this is 1985. So there was no talk about mental health back then. There was
Mm-hmm.
no talk about PTSD. There certainly weren't any, um, places I could go, people I could see, I had no resources.
Yeah, and there was no
And
talk of trauma, right?
no, there wasn't talk of
Mm.
trauma.
Mm-mm.
The other thing is that, like, I went from having this normal teenage life to living some something I wouldn't wish on anyone, really. I mean, I watched my street turn into this circus. Like, there were police officers everywhere. We had a detail. They didn't catch the men involved for 6 days.
Mm.
So we had detail in the front of our house, in the back of our house. We had helicopters over our house for 6 days.
And didn't you say this was a planned murder as
It
well?
was. It was
Mm-hmm.
planned. And unbeknownst to us, we did not realize, it didn't come out until the trial that we were in danger,
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
that we were initially the plan.
I was gonna say, yeah, I bet you were. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's how they work.
And
Hurt the
so,
family.
yeah, so I had no idea. And, you know, when I went home that night, there were so many people in my house. Like, I had no idea. I could hear my mom, I could hear her voice, but I didn't see her. I certainly didn't see my brother. I don't know where he was. And all I wanted to do was hide in my room.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want
Mm-hmm.
to, so my boyfriend and I just went into my room and just kind of held each other and just trying to figure out what was the next thing. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what do we do? And when he left, I just laid in my bed and just hoped to God nobody came to my door. Um, I didn't even see my brother until probably early afternoon the next day. And that was the first time I could hug him and tell him I love him. And I still at that point had no idea what he had seen, what his, experience was. Because, and I'd heard him crying through the night and I couldn't do anything about it. I had nothing. And I just assumed my mom would be the one that would console him.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think the double trauma here was I lost my father, my best friend, my protector, and I was also kind of pushed to the side. Um, obviously everything was the focus was on my brother, and so be it. He watched his dad get killed. So,
Mm-hmm.
and his dad saved his life. That was the last thing my dad did on this earth was save his son. So he told him to duck down in the truck because he knew it was going to come. And so, my brother's experience is a lot different from mine. Um, but, the focus was on him, my mom, my dad. And it even took the media 2 days to figure out he had a teenage daughter. So I had an initial feeling that I wasn't important
Mm-hmm.
in this scenario.
Mm-hmm. I could see that.
And yeah, and that was hard. That was really hard. I was very frustrated. Um, but at the same time, it was just like you just you're in a fog
Mm-hmm.
and initially. And I walked around in a fog. So I did what people told me to do. I went in the direction people told me to do. Like,
Yeah.
I wasn't living at that point. Like, I really wasn't. And I just kind of drifted through the days. Um, and I had so many things in my mind. And, yes, that night was super chaotic. And I don't blame my mom for sending me away. Um, it's not something I would have done as a mother, but that's what she chose to do. And it did affect me. And I didn't realize it affected me until I wrote my book.
Yeah.
Um, so I think for me, I was just struggling and I was struggling with all the things that PTSD gives you, which is anxiety. I had huge anxiety and panic attacks and things like that because my sense of security, even though I didn't know initially that I was in danger,
Mm-hmm.
um, my sense of security was gone. My dad was my protector.
Mm-hmm.
And then um, my anxiety over how am I going to have this relationship with my mother because we were strained before this happened. And so I was just, trying to navigate all of that stuff. And then um, my mom just kind of turtled, she just went into herself. And so I was kind of alone. I was alone on an island, right? I was
Mm-hmm.
the oldest. Um, my brother was too little to comfort me, he
Yeah.
didn't know. And I had the I I had the sense of shame for not stepping up and being the big sister that he needed. But like I said, I had no idea how to navigate this. And
The
I
adults didn't know how to navigate it, let alone a
no,
17-year-old,
absolutely.
you
And
know?
in hindsight, like nobody checked in on me,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I was suicidal, although I didn't know what that was at the time. Like I didn't understand suicidal ideation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I just wanted to be with my dad and I didn't care how that happened. And so for me, it was just like I prayed every day that something would take me out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the deep depression, the not wanting to get up out of bed, the just I felt like my body weighed 400 pounds. Like I just,
Heavy, just
oh yeah,
heavy.
my feet
Mm-hmm.
were like cement every day. And, about a month after my dad was killed, um, funeral was over, all of that. Um, LAPD came to my mother and said, you know what? We want you to go to therapy. We're going to pay for it. We'll send all three of you to different people. And so my mom came to me and said, we need to go to therapy. Well, I thought that therapy back then was people that were crazy. Like if you were
Yeah.
crazy, you saw what I said was a shrink, right? You saw someone like that if you were crazy. And so but like I said, when people just pushed me into a direction, I just went.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when my mom said you're going to therapy, I was agreeable. Like, okay, I'll go to therapy. And I met with this man. And honestly, in hindsight, I feel like he wasn't prepared or educated enough to handle the amount of trauma. And so he ended up keeping our sessions just very generic and very shallow. Like it was all about my relationship with my mom, my relationship with my boyfriend, my relationship with my brother, and school.
And not talking about losing your father, which is what
He
you needed help
he
with.
never, I know this like blows people's mind.
Yeah, that's
He
really.
never asked. He never had that conversation. He never even came remotely close to it. And the entire year that I saw him, every session I kept saying, this is it. He's going to fix me. He's going to figure this out.
Mm,
He's going to, and because I was still going through all of these things and
mhm,
all of this stuff was still swirling around in my head on a daily basis.
mhm.
And again, my boyfriend was only 19 years old, so he didn't know how to navigate this either.
Right,
And
right.
I learned very early on to put an emotional mask on. So people would say to me, "Oh my gosh, you're so strong.
Yeah.
You seem so positive. You seem so happy. So I wore that. I
And that is
completely
probably one of
wore
the
it.
reasons why you got set aside,
Yeah.
because people had that impression of you
Yeah.
and they weren't stopping to realize you're a 17-year-old who just lost her father
Right.
and has gone through some severe trauma.
Yeah. And I even think my mom felt like that. Oh, she's got her
Hmm.
boyfriend. She's got her friends. She doesn't need me. Right. And, but I did need her.
Hmm. Yes,
I
you
needed
did.
somebody. I needed an adult to step up.
Hmm.
And I didn't get that. So after a year of seeing this therapist, he finally looked at me and he said, Susan, you're a well rounded young lady and you're going to be fine for the rest of your life. And I don't need to see you anymore. And I just thought, but wait,
Yeah.
I still have all of this stuff and we haven't even talked about it. And so my mentality at that point was, okay, Susan, you're just broken.
Oh.
You're just broken. You're just crazy. You've snapped. And this is just the way you're going to have to live for the rest of your life. You're just going to have to figure this out on your own. And and that started a really bad road for me
Mhm.
because even though I wasn't doing some of the things like, my mom started drinking and as my brother got older, he got into some trouble and I didn't take that route, but what I took was not healthy either.
Mhm.
And even though I wasn't doing those self-sabotaging things uh in the addiction world, I was still not being genuine, like not being authentic. I wore my emotional mask. I made everybody feel like I was this strong person.
Mhm.
And this went on for 14 years. And
That's a lot
uh,
of buildup.
it is. My husband and I got married. And honestly, like, we weren't ready to get married, but we'd been together 5 years and it was the thing that we needed to do. And I think we both were in the mentality of following what we called the norm of you date, you move in, you get married, you have children, right? And neither of us were in the mentality of doing that, unfortunately, back then, right? Um and so 14 years later, now I'm living in Colorado. We moved to Colorado in 97 and now I have two children. And I'm a mom. I'm a hairdresser. And in 1999 is when the Columbine shootings happened.
Mhm.
I was working that day and I had taken a break, was going into the back room to just kind of chill out a little bit, watch some. We had like a teeny little TV back there. So I just went back there and turned on the TV. A couple of my colleagues were back there and all of the coverage came up. And I watched it and something crazy happened. I started having flashbacks and I saw the kids that were around my own age. I saw all the police officers. I saw the ambulances, all of these things. And as I was watching it, I turned white. I started sweating. I went into full panic attack mode. And my colleagues didn't know my story. So they were asking me questions like, you're too young to have kids there. Do you live by there? Do you have friends that have kids there? Like, what's going on with you? And I looked at her. I said, I have no idea what's happening to me. None. Like, remember, I was told I was going to be fine for the rest of my life.
Right.
This was far beyond fine. I felt like I was spiraling.
You were.
And so, but I did what I always do. I put that emotional mask right back on. And I stepped out into the salon and I did my clients like nothing ever happened. And I got finished that day. I walked out the door and I was in a bad, dark place. And I started having fantasies about driving off a road and ending it. And I tried to hide it the best I could, but my husband's a smart man.
Sounds like mine. Can read you, right? They know. They know.
He knew that it was a slippery slope. He knew it. And he met me at the door one day and he said, you have two choices. You either go get help or I'm taking you to a hospital. And I knew, being a mom, like, it scared me. I didn't want to leave my kids, but at the same time, I didn't want to feel this pain. So I did. I went to the doctor and the doctor put me on antidepressants because that's what they do.
Right.
And then he looked at me and he said, and we need to find you a therapist. And I was like, well, I did that 14 years ago and they
You said
didn't,
I'm fine.
he said I was fine. And, it didn't work. And so, and he's just like, well, but you definitely need something. So I'm going to give you a referral for a couple of people. And I chose this woman and God, thank God I did because she specialized in PTSD. Post-trauma was her thing and especially severe trauma. So she was the perfect person for me to see because I sat down with her and within 5 minutes of meeting her and telling her a little snippet of all the things that I'd gone through since I was 17 years old, she looked at me and she said, everything you've gone through since you were 17 is normal because you have PTSD. And I thought, wait, I was really confused by then because I was like, I didn't go to war. I'm not in the military.
Yeah.
How can I have PTSD? And she said, well, here's the thing. Anyone who has gone through something traumatic in their life can experience PTSD. And what you need to know is that PTSD isn't something that goes away. You can't cure it. What you can do is manage it. And so I describe it as the sky opened up and rainbows shot out because I finally had answers. And for the first time in my life, I started crying because I thought, oh my God, I'm not crazy.
You're not broken.
I'm not broken. This can be managed. And you're going to help me?
I'm going to feel better. I'm not going to have this pain.
Yeah.
Oh.
So it was huge for me. And it was the beginning of my journey. And I think, I use that, that story because I try to explain to people that my healing wouldn't have started if I hadn't had a therapist that I absolutely trusted, that I could be vulnerable with.
Yep. A safe place. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I think a lot of people spend a lot of time with therapists that they don't feel connected to.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens is they start to lie to that therapist,
Mm-hmm.
or they don't open up the way they should.
Yeah.
And then their mentality is therapy doesn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's just because you didn't have the right fit.
Right. Right. And you do need to be, it needs to be a safe place that you need to feel comfortable because you're going to get really uncomfortable in there.
Oh, absolutely. And you
Mm-hmm.
need to be prepared for that.
Yeah.
Like, I tell everyone, my journey has not been easy by any means.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of times I do a talk, it's called Bulldoze Your Fear, because a lot of it was the fear of being out of control.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of, as humans in human condition, we don't run into pain. We run far away from it, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you do run into pain and you start working through those emotions one by one, baby steps, the release from the pain happens, and that creates freedom.
Yes.
And it takes your power back, because whatever you went through in your life has power over you.
Mm-hmm.
Your pain has power over you. Your trauma has power over you. So when you take those steps of really diving in and starting to heal, you're taking your power back.
Yes. Yes. And you're building your self-confidence, your self-esteem, and
Mhm.
you're able to, for me, what that has done is expedited my healing.
Yes, absolutely. And is it scary? Heck yeah.
Is it painful?
Is
Yes.
it painful? Heck yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But when the fear sets in, like for me, for instance, when I wrote my book, there was a lot of fear around writing a book.
Oh, I'm sure. Especially, yeah, I
A
totally get
lot
that.
of
Putting our
fear.
stuff out there, right?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Being 100% authentic, vulnerable,
Yeah,
knowing that with me putting myself out there, I had some security issues.
sure.
I knew that by telling my truth, I would be telling the truth of like my mother, and what would that do to our relationship, even my husband, um, but what I realized was the more I dove in and the more I started to heal, even in writing my book, I realized that this could help others.
Right.
And so that became my purpose,
Right.
right? So anytime I had that fear start to well up in me, I started to think of my purpose.
Yep.
And my purpose outweighed the fear I felt.
Yes. I can 100% relate to that.
So, and so that's why I when I talk to people about bulldozing your fear, that's exactly it,
Mm-hmm.
finding the purpose of wanting to heal. What does it look like for you to be without this pain having a hold on you? Like, what would that feel like for you? What do you want it to feel like for you? And we even go into sobriety and everything, because a lot of people will want to get sober, and they initially dive into just the drinking or how it makes them feel or whatever. But and this is just my opinion, but my opinion is there's a reason behind your drinking. There's a reason behind your drugging. There's a reason behind your doing this self-destructive stuff. Attack that.
Get to the root cause of why you're
Get
drinking.
to the root cause.
Why are
Yep,
you self-medicating?
exactly. And I've had this conversation. I know a young man who is an alcoholic, and I love him. He's like a son from another mother, and it breaks my heart because he grew up in an environment that was so toxic that he doesn't believe that that's trauma,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that was his everyday living experience.
Right.
And so he just thinks he drinks because he likes to drink. And I'm trying to explain to him that you're drinking, granted, both parents are addicts, however, and alcoholics. However, if he were to choose to heal that inner trauma, the childhood trauma, sobriety is attainable.
Absolutely.
But if he
Absolutely.
doesn't, sobriety is going to be way harder to attain. Um,
Yeah. I mean,
and
there's something to that too. He was raised in that too. So that's
exactly.
he got to not only does he have probably the genetic component or whatever, but
Yeah, he has a
he
propensity.
watched his
Mhm.
parents
Yep.
manage their lives by
Yep.
drinking. And
Absolutely.
so that's what he knows. I mean, that is something I'm realizing that is so prevalent in our lives is we really do pay attention to what our parents did and how they handled
Yes.
stuff. And that's all we know. We don't know
Absolutely.
anything different until we teach ourselves something different.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. Like, when I talk to people, like especially when it comes to my mom, um, and I had grandparents, my dad's parents were alcoholics. Um, and my mom, had an alcohol problem. And I watched it. I watched what it did to her. And I
Mm-hmm.
just at an early age, especially at 17, I was like, I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I, I feel crappy, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do that. I think I understood even back then that that's not going to help me because once I become sober, that feeling's going to come right back.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And
I
for
learned
me,
that early on.
I learned this a similar situation because I watched my brother do hard drugs and
Hmm.
he was 7 years older than me, but he started at a young age of 12, 13 years old. And seeing him uh stoned or I mean it wasn't pot that he started with the harder drugs, but seeing him
Hi.
inebriated or whatever high was really scary to me.
Yep. Well, and I didn't watch my brother go down that road. Um, I distanced myself. We're 10 years apart, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was 25 when he started his shenanigans at 15. Um, I tried to talk to him, tried to set him straight. I tried to be a good big sister.
Mm-hmm.
But, he was also, with my mom's drinking came abuse as well. And
Yeah.
so he was in a toxic environment as well.
Mm-hmm.
I moved out at 18. He was 8 years old and I left him behind. Um, and I don't know, I spent my entire life thinking that my mom and my brother had a different relationship than she and I.
Mm-hmm.
And when my brother and I started to heal our relationship, which was about 5 or 6 years ago, we started comparing notes.
Yeah.
um, and what we realized is that, he too had all the experiences that I had, even more. So, both of us felt like we were one man on an island at some point in our life.
Mm-hmm. Because I know it was true in when we did the pre-interview, you had mentioned that you mentioned in this podcast, your dad was your protector.
He was
But what you haven't said is he protected you from your mom.
absolutely.
He was the
He
one, he was your safe place to go. And
he
same
was
with your
our
brother, probably.
yeah, he was our mediator. Absolutely. Like when mom and I would get into it, he would be definitely the voice of reason. And he tried his best.
Mm-hmm.
And I recognize that. Um there were times where I thought that, he should have protected me a little bit more, but he was at work. And a lot of times these conversations that my mom and I had that would go the wrong way, um, were when he wasn't around and
Yeah.
he was not aware of it. So it was hard, and I think writing the book too, it was a real realization of what a healthy relationship should look like
Mm-hmm.
for a mother and a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that, you know, I didn't have that. I didn't have that Hallmark mother. And I talk to a lot of women, a lot of men and women who have the same mentality of you have this fantasy that one day they're going to wake up and they're going to be exactly what you want them to be, and it's not possible, right? And
Mm-mm.
so I've had to, it took me, I'm 55. It took me 54 years to figure this out.
Yeah.
And after the book came out, she chose not to have a relationship with me anymore. And the thing around that is that I'm actually at peace.
Yeah.
Um, so
It's
if any
sad,
of
but
your
I get that.
listeners, yeah, I mean, if any of your listeners are in that boat, I, because they gave birth to us, because they had that for us, I'm not saying our parents don't love us. My mom's just she's got a narcissistic personality, and my book is very, very out there, very personal, very vulnerable. I talk about the deepest, darkest things that I was going through
And
and
this is your story. This is
it's
your
my
story.
story, it's my experiences. I sat down with her. I
Mm-hmm.
had a conversation with her prior to this book going live. And I told her everything that was in it.
Mm-hmm.
I said, Mom, you're going to read some things that are going to be really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I do talk about your drinking. I do talk about my sense of abandonment. I do talk about the fact that you kind of lost yourself, like you lost your identity.
Yeah.
I talk about generational abuse and
Mm-hmm.
how the buck had to stop with me. I'm not saying I'm a perfect person. I'm not saying I'm a better mother. I'm not saying any of that. I just made different choices in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when I left that conversation with her, I felt like maybe she heard me, but I was wrong. Um,
She maybe heard you in the beginning, but then she thought about it.
yeah, I think that's it. And
Mm-hmm.
and so all she saw in my book was that I talked about her drinking.
Right. Right.
And how dare I? And but I didn't vilify her. People deal with trauma differently.
Right.
I'm not blaming people, right? I'm not that's not what we should do. Everybody's trauma is different. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
comparing mine to anybody else. You have your own experiences and you make your own choices.
Right.
I'm trying to help people to find ways to do it on a healthier level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to have
So,
them connect with you and connect with your story and
yes,
connect with what you went through
yes.
so that they can see that there's hope of healing.
Yeah. I try to give people a
Yeah.
safe space to be vulnerable with me,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that I'm not judging
Mm-mm.
by any means.
Mm-mm.
Um, because like I said, everybody's experiences are different and I recognize that. And I can't say, "Oh, I know how you feel." It's the same way with grief and loss, right?
Right.
When people say, "Oh, I know how you feel." No, you don't.
No, you don't.
You don't, because everybody's grief is different. Everybody's relationship with that loved one is different.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know what it feels like for my mom. I don't know what it feels like to
Right.
lose the love of your life
Mm-hmm.
permanently, right? I couldn't even pretend to know what that feels like.
Mm-hmm.
What I know is how I felt losing my father
Mm-hmm.
and the first man I ever loved, right?
Yeah.
And respected. And, I think I'm my father's daughter. He was very present with people. He always made you feel like you were the most important person in the room.
Mm.
And even in his job, I mean, I talked to men and women who worked with him, and they all say the same thing. Like, he was a genuinely wonderful person. He was a mentor. People looked up to him, they respected him.
Mm-hmm.
He was a teacher, which is funny because I love to teach, I love to coach. Um, and so that's why I say, like, I am my father's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And I really feel like, even though this is a horrible situation in my life, I feel like, this was a purpose of me learning from the situation and being able to teach and support others
Mm-hmm.
who are dealing with grief, loss, trauma, anything like that. So, and what's really funny is my husband, for many years, said, "You're going to write a book." And I mean, I had talked about writing a book, but didn't know the first thing about writing a book. Um, and he said, "You're going to help other people.
Oh.
You, I know you're going to do it. I know you're going to write this book. I know you're going to do it." And, so I had his support, the entire time. We've been
Mm-hmm.
through a lot. We've been together 38 years, and there was a divorce in the middle of it. Um, and part of it is I feel like, one, we got married too young.
Mm-hmm.
Neither of us had dealt with our trauma,
Yeah.
and it affected both of us.
Sure. Yep.
And in affecting him, it caused him to have some behaviors that were self-sabotaging
Mm-hmm.
and sabotaged our relationship. But at the same point, I'm just as guilty because I let it happen.
Right.
I, you know, I have a chapter in my book called Rose-Colored Glasses because I did. Everybody said we were like Ken and Barbie. We'd been together for so long. We were the perfect couple, and we both put on that emotional mask.
Mm-hmm.
We both did it. We wore it. We were like, "Yep, yep, you're right." And we were
Mm-hmm.
we were not a perfect couple.
Your
And
mask was your coping mechanism. It was one of the
absolutely,
ways that you guys coped with life.
100%. And so, when he read my book, I tried to give him snippets here and there as I was writing it, or in the editing part.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, "No, I'm not reading it until it's printed and it's tangible and I can read it that way." And so I was nervous. I was like, "Oh boy, we've come a long way." And I'm really nervous. And I went to a baby shower for a client one day, and I came back, and he had the book in his hand and tissues right by him. And he said, "I can't put this down.
Oh.
I, I can't put this down. This is incredible. Like, I need to keep reading it. Go away, do your thing, and let me finish this book."
Oh.
And he read it an entire day.
Wow.
Um, and I feel like even there were things in there that he didn't even know about me.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. You were showing some of the darkest sides of you that you
Oh
were
yeah,
living. So yeah, he's not going to
abs
know that.
no. I mean, and the conversations that we've had past that, it's just been incredible.
Mm-hmm.
It has brought our relationship to a whole different level.
I bet.
And, and I think for the first time, he feels acknowledged that he too went through the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
For a long time, he just said, "Oh, I was just a jerk." But I kept telling him, I said, "No, it's more than that, Matt. There's a reason why people do what they do,
Mm-hmm.
and hurt people hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, I spent so much time in fight or flight my entire life
Me too.
that I didn't never stopped to think about his trauma and how it
Mm.
affected him. It wasn't until I wrote the book and, really was during the editing part of writing the book, I, read it over and over and over again. I realized, oh my God, we've never addressed it. We've been in and out
Mm.
of counseling, couples counseling and all that stuff. Especially after the divorce, we dove in and before we remarried, um, we went into couples therapy and really dove in just on, again, kind of a shallow, you know,
Surfacey.
surfacey kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we never dove into his trauma.
I
We
bet he
never
was
even
so
discussed
focused
it.
on you and your family at that
He
time that
was.
he didn't even think about himself. I mean, which is very common.
Yeah,
And then he had to continue focusing on you and making sure you're okay.
right. And
Mm-hmm.
so, he even knows, like, I hate this word, but he even knows, like, my triggers.
Yeah.
He is so in tuned with me. But as we both realized, with this book, we both realized, oh my gosh, this wasn't just your journey, it was our journey.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right. I've had trauma
Mm.
and stackable trauma. And um and so, it was an acknowledgement for both of us that, oh my gosh, now it's your turn, right? Let's dive into you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's have the conversations around you. And that's where we're at now, and it's just I think for men too, it's really difficult to really dive
Mm-hmm.
into what it lies behind their behaviors.
And when it comes to
Um,
emotions and feelings,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's a little
And
tough.
you know what? I, I, like I said, my husband is my hero. Yes, we've gone through some pretty bad times. However, he's still my hero. And I mean, just recently we had a conversation about him staying because in the very beginning, when we were teenagers, he even said, I had a really good, I, I, I knew how to sabotage relationships early on. And he was already starting to do that um, before my dad was killed and was
Mm.
not sure if we were going to continue in the relationship. But something that night told him he needed to stay in this relationship with me. And I think part of it too is that he recognized that my mom was going to step out. Like
Mm.
he recognized what was going to happen. And
Interesting.
I think he felt like I was going to need a friend. I was
Mm-hmm.
going to need
You're going to need the support.
support, right?
Yeah.
Not that, it wasn't a I feel sorry for you thing, but it really does show his character because at
Yeah.
19 years old,
Mm-hmm.
most boys would have hightailed it out of there.
Oh, they'd
Like,
have been gone.
this is way too much for me.
Yeah.
This is way too intense. I'm out, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And, even though we dealt with things later down the road in our marriage, um, and before our marriage, in our dating lives too, um, he still, there was still that part of him that
Mhm.
was committed to me.
Yeah.
And, you know, he loved me intensely, even before he knew that he loved me intensely. Um, and I think, I tell people, even if when you have no hope because you feel broken, right?
Mhm.
And you start to heal. You go to a therapist, you find someone that you connect with, you're doing the work. The people around you are on that journey with you.
Yes.
So it also, you got to understand that there has to be no expectations, because you're healing and you're getting better does not mean everyone around you is going to be in the same mentality.
Right. Right. Everybody has their own journey.
Absolutely.
And
And
they pick their journey.
absolutely. And, and you have to tell yourself, like, this is my journey. And the people that choose to go along with it are going to be there. And the ones that aren't are going to drop off
Mhm.
because they're either not ready or they're scared to.
Mhm.
Um, so I've lost friends, and it was fine. I lost my mother, her relationship, um, and I'm okay with that. I'm at peace because the people that are around me right now get it.
Yeah.
They get it. They support me.
Mhm.
Um, and that's what's important. I spent a lot of time like trying to blend in or trying to be
Mhm.
someone that other people needed me to be.
I was a chameleon. I called
It
myself a
was,
chameleon.
yeah, and it's exhausting.
It is. Ugh, it's
It's
impossible.
exhausting. You can't keep up that pace.
Mm-mm, mm-mm. No, I would
And
I would change myself for every single person, and I would accommodate them because I wanted to make sure that they
mhm,
continue to like me.
yep,
So it was with everybody.
yep, exactly. I mean, I even did that with my own mother. I kept thinking to
Yeah.
myself, oh my gosh, if I do this,
Yeah.
she'll love me more. If
Right.
I do this, she'll be proud of me more,
Right.
whatever. And I think the biggest aha for me was I did a speaking event back in 2019. And I was speaking to an organization here in Denver. And I was their keynote speaker at an event. And I had my kids, of course, I wanted my children there. And my husband said, "Are you going to invite your mother?" And we had a relationship back then. And I was like, "No, I I don't want to invite her because somehow, some way, she will make this about her."
Mm-hmm.
And he talked me into it. He's got a huge heart. So he talked me into it. And the reason he talked me into it was he's like, "Susan, she lives in victim mentality and you live in survivor mentality. She needs to hear your story from the survivor end."
Mm.
And I said, "Okay, I'll invite her." So I did. And I had some clients come and I had some, I'm a realtor, so I had some vendors come to
Mm-hmm.
support me, which kind of blew my mind.
Yeah.
And my talk at that point was, it was more motivational, but it was also my journey and trying to, this was an organization for women coming out of homelessness,
Mm.
and it was their graduation. And so I wanted to leave them with the idea of, even if you feel like you're on your own, you got this. Like, I did this on my own. I found my own resources, and you don't necessarily have to have family or, that kind of support to be able to help yourself.
Right.
And so that was my talk. My talk was about how I had to figure things out on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom sat and she listened to it, which I thought she listened to it. So after we were done, we went to dinner. And as we were coming out of the restaurant to leave to go home, she said, I'm really proud of you. And I thought, oh, that's amazing.
I finally
I'm
get
gonna
to
hold
hear
on to
that.
that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hold on to that. But then 2 seconds later, she said, yeah, you're amazing. But then again, you do come from your dad and I. And I was like, huh?
What does that mean?
So this is all about you. You know, I'm good because I came from you.
Right. You didn't do
I'm
any of this on your own.
amazing because I came from you. Like, that was a big aha for me.
Mm-hmm.
It really showed me the toxic relationship we had.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there were other things, but I was just like, did you not listen to a word that just came out of my mouth? Did you not? Because I just said everything in who I am, I have done this. Yes, you gave birth to me, 100%.
Mm-hmm. I'll give you that. Yep.
You
Yep.
gave birth to me, but this is me. I am who I am because of the work that I've done and the
Mm-hmm.
choices I have made, right? Good, bad, or indifferent. I
Yep.
am what you see is what you get. I
Mm-hmm.
am 100% out there, authentic. Like, I don't pretend to be anyone other than who I am anymore,
Mm-hmm.
right? That emotional mask is gone. I
Yeah.
have put it away. I have retired it. It's gone. And what you see is what you get. And I did it through all the work that I've had to do with different modalities and,
Mm-hmm.
um and so that was really hurtful to me.
Yeah.
That was very hurtful to me because I thought, again, going back to that fantasy, I thought that when she heard my thoughts, my experience, my whatever, that she would finally get it.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't happen.
That is a narcissist. They will not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, that was the other thing. When I talk about stackable trauma, what I realized is that I grew up with a narcissistic parent
Mm-hmm.
who spent a lot of time gaslighting me since the time I was probably in before middle school.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when my mom decided, or when my mom saw that she could no longer manipulate me,
Mm-hmm.
guilt me, gaslight me, that's when I think, and I tell people this, she doesn't like me.
They're done with
Does
you
not
when they can't
like
control you
me.
anymore. When they
Yeah.
have
She
nothing
may
over
love
you.
me, but she doesn't like me.
Mm-hmm.
And she doesn't like that she can no longer manipulate me.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing of it is that I feel very peaceful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And at first I felt a little bit of guilt,
Sure.
because I'm like, she's you know, my surviving parent. And out of obligation, I should just suck it up, right? But then you have to think, oh my gosh, I've done all of this work and I am not going backwards.
Yeah.
I know what my worth is. and I know what I deserve. And the relationship we have is not, it doesn't support that at all. So, and I try to explain this to my brother. He's in his own journey,
Mm-hmm.
Um, but at the same time, like he gets where I'm coming from.
He's just not ready to do that either.
He's just not ready to
Mhm.
let go. And
Mhm.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Because you got to do it on your own when you're ready.
On your own terms, and
And
yeah,
on
when you're
your own
ready.
terms.
Mhm.
And when you're ready, and he's not ready yet. And that's
Mhm.
okay. That's fine. But yeah, I mean, I when you're in this healing journey, it really opens your eyes. It really, you see things differently.
You definitely do.
You do. You see things differently. You recognize when things are unhealthy, and you don't want to step into that
Right.
again. Um, so I tell people, like, if you really want to heal, I'm talking to your listeners. If you really want to heal and you want a different life for yourself and you want to grab your power back, you want to take your power back. One, and this is a really like hard subject, but it's that subject of forgiving.
Mhm.
You're not forgetting. You're
And
not
you're not saying what they did was okay
you're
by
not
any stretch of.
minimalizing.
Mm-mm.
No, you're not doing any of that. When you
Mhm.
forgive, you're doing it for yourself.
Yes.
And when you do that for yourself, what you're doing is you're taking your power back and you're telling that person, you can no longer have a hold over me.
Mhm.
Because when you're wallowing, when you're depressed, when you're anxiety ridden, when you're doing all of those things, yes, it is a normal part of feeling trauma. It's a normal part of having post trauma. However, if you continue in that pattern, it's almost like you're giving them your power
Mhm.
over, right? And
Mhm.
so for me, I had to find forgiveness for the men who took my dad.
Mhm.
And it was not easy.
Mm-mm.
It was not there. It was a fight. It was a real fight. But when I realized that in doing that, even forgiving my husband, right? Forgiving the people that hurt me in my life, I'm taking my life back. I'm taking my power back. I'm
Mhm.
telling them, yes, you did this awful thing, but I am not giving you any more power over me.
Mhm.
And being in victim mentality is exactly that. You're giving that power away.
It's like you have that learned helplessness.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And so I, in my healing journey, I just realized that I needed to take my power back. I needed to have some kind of a semblance that I was going to be okay at some point. Like,
Mhm.
and that they can't hurt me anymore. And no matter what, um, the realization really in 2017, one of the men that was involved was paroled after 32 years. And people were just up in arms. My mom wrote letters every time he came up for parole, and then I was expected to.
Mm.
So I would.
Mhm.
But down in the deep in my pit of my, being, I realized that the last time, right before he was paroled, my mom was up in arms and mad. And, she's lived with so much anger
Oh yeah.
for this whole, I mean, she's never let go of it,
Mhm.
which has eaten her alive.
Which is a great example of what happens when we don't have forgiveness in our life.
Literally.
That anger turns to bitter and then resentment, and it affects us and then
Absolutely.
our loved
100%.
ones.
Yep. 100%. And so my mentality was different. I had gotten to the point where I was sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Mhm.
I kept trying to move forward, but every time he came up for parole, I would go backwards because you have to relive this. And, my
Sure.
mom's saying you have to write letters, and, it brings up all of the emotions. And anyone who's ever been in my boat will understand this. You're trying to move forward, and
Mhm.
this drags you back. And you have to work even harder to get past it.
Mhm.
So this last time before he was paroled, I just told myself, you know what? I have no control. I have to let go of control.
Yeah.
I have no control over what's going to happen. So if he does get paroled, it is what it is. And I can only put out into the universe that I hope that he doesn't do to another family what he did
Yeah.
to mine, and that he makes better choices in his life. And I wished that he had some remorse for what he did and the role he played. However, it was his choice, and it's his life, and it's his journey, and I had to let go of it.
Mhm.
So when he was paroled, I wasn't devastated. I was actually, it was the first time I felt peace about it. And I felt like I can move on now. Finally,
Mhm.
really move on.
I think the realization of letting go of the control and realizing that, because I know that was profound for me as well, is realizing, you know what? I can't control this. As
Right,
much as I want to, I can't.
right.
So I've got to let it go.
Exactly. And, I talk to people about it, and they're like, oh, there's no way. And he needs to rot in jail, and I can't believe they paroled him and this and that. And I'm just like, let go of it.
Mhm.
Let go of it. It's not an emotion that you need to be holding on to. It's
Mhm.
not. It's not serving you.
Right.
It's hurting you. You
Mhm.
want to continue to hurt yourself, then you have that mentality. But
Mhm.
so that was the other reason behind the book, is that I wanted, and especially in the law enforcement world, because there's still a lot of people 38 years later, there's still people out there that are still reeling and
Mm.
mad and hurt and sad about my dad's death. It affected people
Mhm.
profoundly. And so when I wrote it, that was my hope, that this would get out to the law enforcement world and give them an insight
Mhm.
into seeing resiliency from what happened,
Mhm.
from seeing the healing, to see that I'm okay,
Yeah.
and that it's okay for them to heal from it themselves, to give them some hope. And, I have heard from some of these men and women, and they have gotten exactly that. And I
Oh.
am grateful.
Yeah.
I am so grateful, um, because there are a lot of men and women that were around in the department back then, and they did know about me, but kind of off the side kind of
Mhm.
thing. And they did wonder, you know, and for them to be able to see and read about my journey and where I'm at now, it did give them hope. It did give them a sense of peace
I
about it.
would I would imagine that when they read that, read your book and read your story and see how dark it got for you,
Yeah.
that how emotional it would be for them. And
Yes.
it would stir up a lot in them.
Mm-hmm.
But the beautiful thing is, like you said, you come out of this the other end healing and, in a better place,
Yep.
and you are moving forward and you're making beauty from ashes, right? And you're helping others. And it's my hope that when they see that is what absolutely, like you say, gives them hope.
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, my book is for anyone, right?
Right.
It's not just for law enforcement. Um, but that definitely was a priority for me,
Sure.
that those folks that were feeling that way and still angry and all of that would read my journey and just say, oh my gosh, if she could do all of that, if she
Exactly.
could feel all of that, then, and she's okay and she's come
Mm-hmm.
out the other side. Now, I'm not done by any means, like just
Right,
because I
right.
wrote a
We're not
book.
done with our healing journey. Yeah, no, no, no.
Ever evolving, right? But to see where I'm at now, you know, and I'm not that little 17-year-old girl anymore. I think it was, and that's the conversations that I've got to have with some of them who have read the book and have thanked me.
Mm.
Um, I had just in October, I had a woman reach out to me by email. I was at my son's wedding and I got this email, and it was from a woman who was married to a police officer who was there that night. And he was one of the police officers that was with my brother. And he apparently, unbeknownst to me, this is the first I heard it, was through this email. He would go by my mom's house. He would go by our house and check on my mom and check on my brother and make sure that they were doing okay. Uh, that night really profoundly changed his life.
Mm-hmm.
And when my brother got older, he tried. He went into the LAPD Explorer program, and he was really trying to step into my dad's shoes,
Mm-hmm.
but he didn't know how. And so he went into this Explorer program, and he was at the mall one day, and this officer and his partner were there. And my mom saw him and introduced him to my brother and said, you need to thank this man because he was with you that night, which wasn't fair to my brother, really.
Mm-mm.
but but that's mom's mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So he thanked him, and they stayed in touch. I didn't know that. My brother, when I brought it up with my brother, he was like, "Oh yeah, I remember him." I said, "Well, mom never told me." I was not aware of this officer at all until I got this email.
And that's really important. That's huge.
It is. But again, that shows you
Mm-hmm.
the mentality. So, but she said, it was profound for him. He lived with that. That moment of meeting my brother and seeing him as an explorer, it gave him hope, right? So she saw my book, she picked it up and she read it. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2018 and was not able to read my book.
Mm.
And that was hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But she said, you know what? I'm so proud of you. And I feel so much, I want to thank you for writing this book because I actually talk about that officer, but I didn't know his name. Um, I just knew that, an officer was with my brother that night,
Mm-hmm.
along with a teacher, at the school. So, she was honored that I mentioned him, even though I didn't know his name. But yeah, I mean, it was a big aha moment for me to realize that, yeah, these people that have these memories and were affected by
Mhm.
my dad's murder.
It was trauma for them.
It was trauma for them. And so her thanking me was like, I I was so humbled. I
I'm
was so
sure.
grateful and humbled, and you know, it 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 served its purpose,
Mhm.
and it proved my purpose, right?
Mhm.
My purpose shows up, and when you're living in it, it shows up.
Mhm. Absolutely.
So that email was just incredible to me.
Mhm.
And I'm so sorry that she lost him. But
Mhm.
um yeah, I mean it was just obviously I've saved the email. I'm gonna
Oh, yeah.
And I did. I replied back to her. I'm sure she was like, and I had to laugh because she said, "Oh yeah, I emailed your mother too." And I thought, "Uh-oh."
Not sure you get a response from her, but
Uh-oh. Because she's not going to want to hear that. She's not going to
Yeah.
want to
Oh,
hear
no,
the,
she's not gonna wanna
"Oh my
hear
God, I can't believe your daughter wrote
how
this book and
wonderful
it's
your
so
daughter
amazing."
is.
She, so I was just like, okay, whatever. But yeah, I just, stories like that, it's just very humbling.
Mhm.
I spoke in 20, I was flown out to, I think I told you this.
Yeah, this is a good story.
I was flown out to San Diego. They wanted me to speak at their the LAPD delegates conference in San Diego in September. And so they flew my husband and I out, and I had my books with me. They gave me a table, and I got the honor of speaking. And I didn't know I was a keynote speaker until I got there, but there were two of us, and this was a extremely humbling experience for me. Uh, I sat and I listened to the first keynote speaker, and his name is Denny Wright. He is a 30-year veteran police officer out of Rochester, New York. And he patrolled the same area for 30 years. He got a call, and there was a young man who was having a mental break, a psychotic break. And Denny showed up by himself. Um, and he just told the gentleman, we watched his body cam, which was rough. He told the gentleman, I don't want any trouble. I'm just here to help you. And we care about you, and that kind of thing. Um, the young man lost it. He just totally lost it, grabbed a knife and stabbed Denny in the eye and continued to stab him. And I think it was the postmaster or the mailman and a neighbor came flying into the house and pulled this suspect off. Um, the police came and they scooped him up, took him to the hospital. Denny is completely blind. He is blind in the initial eye, but he had damage to the other eye, and he almost died multiple times. Um, During his rehab, he was sent to therapy for PTSD.
Mhm.
Um, and the fact that he's now disabled and has to live blind with other issues as well. Um, and he was there with his handler. His wife was not able to make the trip. So he had a young lady that he had trained, and she is his handler now and goes around with him and guides him wherever he needs to go. And so as I'm watching and listening to this gentleman speak, I just like blasted in my, head. I was just so like amazed that this man was standing up there and he was alive. But what came out of his mouth was even more incredible. One, he said he doesn't hold his attacker any ill will, that he forgave him, and that in therapy, he realized that he spent a lot of years in this machismo mentality and compartmentalized all of the stuff that he dealt with on a daily basis. And because he did that and didn't deal with the emotional, part of that, that all of his relationships around him could have been a lot better, could have been a lot more healthier if he had learned to communicate better. And he said, hurt people hurt people. And my husband had to grab my arm because I wanted to leap up out of my chair.
I bet.
So, because it is a conversation that I have with law enforcement. And he was saying all the things that I know in my heart, in my gut. And I was just so stinking proud of him. Because he did. He said, you guys, this machismo thing is a bunch of bull. And if you need to seek therapy, so be it. Because you're healing yourself. You will be a better officer. You will be a better wife, husband, father, cousin, whatever, right? And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely incredible. And I have to follow this man.
Dang it.
Shoot.
How do I top that?
Right? So
just get up there and say, yeah, what he said.
Right? Ditto. And the gentleman that introduced me, he's the president of their union. It's the LAPD Police Protective League. And he knew my dad. And what happened to my dad profoundly affected him. And my introduction blew my mind. I was like, holy cow. It's almost like, who are they talking about? What? And I went up and I spoke for about 37 minutes. And then we had some question and answers. And it was just, it was so incredible to see the impact that my talk did, and the conversations that it started. And I went back to my table, and Denny came up to me. And he was like, I need to hug you, young lady. And I was like, I'm sorry, what?
Oh,
it was incredible. Like my hero was literally standing in front of me. And he was just like, oh my gosh, I listened to your talk. You're incredible. Like, thank you so much. I needed to hear that myself. I needed to hear because my kids almost lost me.
Yeah.
I needed to hear how it affected you. I needed to hear that. He's like, you made me cry. I'm like, ditto. I said, the fact that I had to come after you was like rough, man. So it was a love fest, and, we hugged it out, and it was incredible, like absolutely incredible. And we had an incredible conversation, he and I. And then that night there was a cocktail hour, and a lot of these delegates were coming up to me and wanting, and what was really interesting is there was a lot of, and even my husband said this blew my mind, because people were telling me some things, right? They were so vulnerable with me.
Mm.
Um, and telling me their stories and their childhood abuse stories and
Mm-hmm.
whatever, right? And I just tried to reiterate that it was important for them to take care of themselves. And this whole mentality of, if you seek therapy means you're weak,
Mm-hmm.
the brotherhood thing,
Mm-hmm.
all of that, it needs to move on. Like,
That's old. That's old
it's
stories.
it's old, and what's important is that you take care of yourself, because in taking care of yourself, you're able to be a better whatever.
Mm-hmm. Better
And
everything.
so, yeah, and we got it ended, and we went back to our room. My husband was like, "I'm exhausted. I don't know how you do this."
Yeah.
He's like, I said, "Because I'm in my purpose, Matt. Like,
Yes.
this is what I was meant to do." Right?
Mm-hmm.
I was meant to connect with people. I was meant
Mm-hmm.
to show them that they can be vulnerable without being weak. Um, and the next morning we were going to leave and go to another hotel, because both of us needed to decompress. This was like a
A
lot.
lot. Yeah.
And one of the delegates came up to us at breakfast and said, "You need to come and listen to the new chief of police speak." And I was like, "Okay." So his name is Michael Moore. We went and we listened to him speak. What was incredible was everything that I had talked about the day before was coming out of this man's mouth. And he was saying how important it was for mental health, um, and that he was going to make sure that his officers were okay and that they were
Mm-hmm.
supported in the ways that they needed to be supported. And gone are the days where, there's some kind of stigma
Yeah.
around it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, he was talking about equipment, making sure, because that all affects your mentality. It all
Mm-hmm.
affects your mental capabilities. When you're out on the field and your equipment's not working, your radio's not working, like that's putting you in danger and harm's way. It's
Mm-hmm.
also putting the community in harm's
Mm-hmm.
way, right? So the things that he was saying was giving me some optimistic vibes. And I thought, we have a long way to go. However, what he was saying was important.
Mm-hmm.
And he got done speaking, and I told my husband, I said, I want to go meet him. And I went up and I went to introduce myself, and he said, "I know who you are." And I was like, "I'm sorry, what?" He said, "I know who you are." He said, "I was on the force when your dad was killed,
Mm-hmm.
and he was on one of the details. And it was the trial, I think. And he remembers everything, and it profoundly affected
Mm-hmm.
him." And so I was just guffaw. Like, I didn't know what to say. And he said, he's like, "Susan, here's the thing. I recognize that all the focus was on your brother and your mother, and I felt like you were pushed aside." And I was just like, "Oh, what?"
I remember when you told me that on the pre-interview, and I was just like, I wish you would have heard that
Right?
back in the day, right?
I was like, I looked at my husband, we looked at each other and went,
Yeah.
"Holy cow." Right? And then he reached into his pocket and he pulled out this gold coin, and it was a medallion. and he calls it the Medallion of Honor. And he handed it to me and he said, I want you to understand that you will always be a part of the LAPD family. And don't ever forget that. Like, you are important to us. And I was like, thank you. Gotta go.
Because I got to go cry my eyes out.
Oh, my husband and I were bawling as we were leaving the room. Like, we lost it. We lost it. And it was such a humbling, incredible experience. And I felt completely honored to be able to speak. I'm hoping to get on more
Mm-hmm.
law enforcement stages.
Mm-hmm.
It was such an honor for me to be able to speak in this environment and to help people heal
Mm-hmm.
in that capacity. And to have the chief of police, the Los Angeles Police Department, have that feeling as well, and that healing and that hope. Just,
It's
there are
like your
no
life came,
words.
it's like your life came full circle.
It did.
You finally got that validation that you needed
I
back
did.
then.
Well, so I don't know if I told you this story, but you never know how far you've come
Mm-hmm.
until you come full circle.
Mm-hmm.
So back in July, I was in Southern California again. I had a book signing and a speaking engagement with some other law enforcement. They were retired. And before we left, I had told my husband, I'm like, let's go to the cemetery, visit Dad. So we did. I wanted to have a little conversation with him. And we went there and his marker was a mess. So we spent some time cleaning up. And while we were doing that, I told my husband, like, I want to go to the school before we leave, before we get on the plane. Now, anytime I ever went to the school, the anxiety was through the roof.
Yeah.
Like, I literally was crawling out of my skin and felt like I was going to throw up.
You were going right back to that day.
Absolutely.
Your body was absolutely responding to that day.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And but there is a placard that is LAPD put placards on the streets where officers were killed in the line of duty. And so my dad's placard is on the front of the school, even though he was killed on the back of the school. And that street is Glade. The front of the school is Farallone. And so we drove up there and went and saw the placard and was taking pictures. And I felt very peaceful for the first time ever. I did not feel any anxiety at all.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, I thought, how far can I push myself? Let's see. I didn't tell my husband this thought process.
That's probably a good thing.
We got in the car and I was driving. So we drove up the street on Farallone and started to make a right on the street that connects Glade and Farallone.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband looked at me and he was a little nervous.
Mm-hmm.
He was a little nervous and he was like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Give me a minute." And I could tell that he was getting anxious because
Mm-hmm.
he's not sure what he's going to have to do, I'm sure. Like, I don't know. I wasn't in his head, but he was just like, "Are you sure about this?" Like, I'm sure he was thinking that, right? And I made a ride on Glade and drove up the street, turned around and parked the car. And at that point, I started to describe everything I saw that night. Where the ambulance was, where my dad's body was, where the truck was, and my husband was like just sitting in the passenger side, like, what is happening right now?
Mm-hmm.
I felt peace. I can't even describe it. I felt like just completely peaceful. There was not 1 ounce of me that had any anxiety. My stomach was fine. My brain wasn't all over
Mm-hmm.
the place. I was peaceful. I felt like my dad was there for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband said, I can't believe we're doing what we're doing right now. Because neither one of us ever thought that that would happen,
Mm-hmm.
ever.
Yeah.
And he said, you've come full circle. And I
Mm-hmm.
said, yeah, I guess I have. And I was so proud of myself, because I
Yeah.
didn't think this was ever going to happen, ever.
Yeah.
I
Boy,
haven't,
that is such a story of encouragement for our listeners. That is
I,
huge.
when I say bulldoze your fear, that's
You
my
meant it.
example. If I could push that fear aside and keep moving forward like that and end up on the street that took my dad's life, anyone can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not special. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
we're all capable. We are all capable.
You have a few things showing your healing though, too, because of the fact that one of the killers was released and you were able to work through that and have peace about that and
Mhm.
realize that I don't have any control. You went to the school,
Mhm.
the front of the school, just going into that area, even driving into that
Mhm.
neighborhood, I would imagine is enough. And then you went around the corner and went to where your father was killed.
Right.
That's just 3 right there.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I was like, wow, okay, this book did more for me than years of therapy did.
It did.
Uh,
And it's going out and it's you already see that it's helping others.
Absolutely. And that's my purpose. That's
Mm-hmm.
my purpose is obviously the book was my purpose, but my message is my purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Getting
Mm-hmm.
out there and showing people that there is hope and you can do this. And I'm not special. You know what I mean? Like I don't have some special spidey sense. Like uh, everyone is capable of doing this if they're willing to do the work to
Yes,
be able to get here.
took the words right out of my mouth. You were willing to do the work.
Yep,
And I say this, and this is true in my life, and you mentioned it earlier, it's true in your life, that it's more than one modality too.
absolutely.
You
There's
know,
no one size fits all either.
nope, there's no one thing that's going to just take it all and heal everything. It'd be great, but
Right.
there's not. And it's really where you're at in your healing journey, where those modalities come in and work in that specific area.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And, for me, and I think we talked about this, I tell people baby steps.
Yes,
Um,
very much.
and even that's the route my therapist took, my second one,
Mm-hmm.
because she was like, I'm not going to throw all this stuff at you, right?
And overwhelm you.
We're going to take each one of these emotional things that happen to you with the PTSD, and we're going to attack them one at a time. And
Mm-hmm.
so the first thing was I was not sleeping. I had not slept in years.
I bet.
And when you don't get rest, it affects your mental health.
It will, yeah, it'll make everything worse for
Yep.
sure.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And brain fog and,
Mm-hmm.
all of that stuff.
Your
So,
body needs to sleep.
mhm. Yeah, and I was a mom, and I went through years of like not sleeping through the night, as
Yeah.
all moms and dads go through, and everything. But on top of that, anytime I went to go to sleep, I would get anxious because that's when my brain would just turn on and it would
Mm-hmm.
not shut off.
Mm-hmm.
And it would take me down roads that I did not want to go down,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so initially she told me, you know what? Let's get you journaling. And I want you to journal before you go to bed.
Mm.
Because when you are getting all of that swirly stuff in your head
Mm-hmm.
on the paper or whatever you do to journal. And there's multiple ways you can do that. Some people do it in music. Some people do it with art. Some people do it with writing.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever that is for you, and for me, I was like, I felt this was like wishy-washy, whatever. But,
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, I was like, she's a professional. I should just listen to her. Right. So I started journaling at night and getting all of that swirly stuff out of my head. And what I was finding is that I was able to sleep.
Mm.
So that was the first step for me. And I
Mm-hmm.
realized how absolutely powerful that one little thing is.
Yeah.
And then we went into the anxiety part, and I started learning tapping.
Mm-hmm.
We started working with some breath work.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was ready, really ready, that's when we dove into EMDR.
That's what I'm doing. Yeah.
And that was super powerful. And, part of me wishes that I had continued on that journey a little bit more. Um, but at the time I had other things going on, and I felt like I was at a pretty good place, and that something else was going to come up and help me and guide me and whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
it was writing a book, but it didn't
Mm-hmm.
happen until, I was 50 years old.
Right.
Um, I had to be at that mentality. I had to be strong enough
Right. And have enough healing under you
and
in
have
order
enough
to do
healing
that.
in order to
Mm-hmm.
dive, because I had
Yeah.
to dive and I had to relive and I had to feel all the things
Mm-hmm.
all over again. But this time I had the tools to be able to help me to get out of that
Yes.
mentality,
Right.
out
And
of
to
that
manage
state of
it,
mind
right?
and
Mm-hmm.
manage it.
Mm-hmm.
And there were days where I had to give myself grace. I had to say, you know what? I don't have anything left. Like I can't go show property.
Yeah.
I can't talk to my clients. I just can't do it because I am not in the right state of mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that was okay.
Mm-hmm.
I gave myself grace, and on those days where you have to give yourself grace, do something that gives you a little bit of joy,
Yes. And don't sit and
whatever
feel
that is.
guilty. Don't feel
Right.
guilty.
Yep.
We all need our days, and
Yeah.
sometimes we're just not up for it, and that's okay. We're human.
Exactly. You
And you
know?
need to give your body, if you need to go rest, then go take a nap.
Yeah.
If you want to just go sit outside and read a book, then
Yep.
whatever it is, you're right.
Go for
Mm-hmm.
a walk.
Yep.
Go, get your nails done if you're a woman.
Right.
If you're a man, like, go to the gym, work
Right.
out, like whatever it is that gives you some joy,
Mm-hmm.
do it.
Right. Right.
Something that shows love for you, right? And
Exactly.
and I always told myself tomorrow is a different day.
Mm-hmm.
And um I can make it what I want, and that always it brought a smile to my face, because I knew that I just need to keep moving forward,
Mm-hmm.
um and still keep loving myself through it, and give myself grace, and not feel any guilt uh about what was coming out of my words, what was
Mm-hmm.
coming out of my mouth, what was coming
Having a
out of my
voice.
head.
Mm-hmm.
Having a voice, yes. So, and this is why I enjoy being on podcasts, because it gives me an opportunity to speak to people and really uh, hope to help others in hearing my story and
Mm-hmm.
hearing the hope in my voice.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. And that's why I'm doing this podcast, is if I can get people out there that can share their story that's going to shorten someone's suffering.
Absolutely. You're doing good work.
Yeah, thank you. And as are you.
Well,
This has
this
been, go ahead, go ahead.
this is the beginning of my journey. I started speaking last year. I'm really hoping to be able to get on more stages this year,
Yeah,
whether it's virtual or otherwise.
right. Yeah,
But
you
yeah,
need to definitely get out there and talk to more of the unions for the police officers. And
Yep.
yeah. And it sounds like, especially for the LAPD, I'm really glad to hear that they're going in the right direction and they really are looking at the mental part. Because I honestly, I mean, I knew before I'm a big, it used to be called Live PD, but now it's On Patrol Live. So it
Uh-huh.
shows the police officers, it's live.
Uh-huh.
And I've always had a respect for them and always thought, wow, they go through a lot. But when you see that and you're living it out, they're saints.
Absolutely. And, this conversation has, it's very complicated, and we live in an
Mhm.
environment that makes it very complicated.
Yeah.
I've had some incredible conversations with vets,
Mhm.
and one of the vets and I were talking about the fact that a lot of these police departments will go after vets to become police officers. And he had an opinion about that, this man,
Mm.
because he said, Susan, when I came out of the military, he was in the military for 10 years. And he came out because he didn't feel aligned with what they were doing
Mhm.
at the time. And this was after 9/11. And he said, so many police departments sent me letters wanting me to be on the force. And he said, honestly, my mentality was not healthy. And
Mm.
he said, you need to understand, he's telling me, like, you need to understand that when we go into the military, we're trained to kill
Yeah.
and we're not trained to de escalate. We don't have those tools.
Because you weren't taught them.
Mentally, we're not taught them. So when you're putting a police officer out there who has been dealing with trauma and has not dealt with the trauma,
Mhm.
there are mistakes that are going to be made.
Absolutely.
And there are going to be choices that are going to be made that could affect the public
Mhm.
or themselves. And he said, I chose not to be on the department. And I told them why. I am not in any way, shape, or form mentally capable of being a police officer. Because and he told me, he was very transparent with me. And he said, honestly, if I got into a situation where my life was in danger, I would shoot first and ask
Mhm.
questions later.
Mhm.
And, and so I feel like that all stems from the hurt people
Mhm.
conversation. And, you know, when they go off to war, they see some seriously horrible stuff. My, my brother has seen some pretty horrible stuff besides seeing his dad. And it's just,
You
I
don't
feel
come
for
back
them
from
in
that.
that way. You don't.
You don't
You're a
come back from
human
that.
being. You are a
Mm-mm.
human being. We
Nope.
can
Yeah.
only handle so much trauma,
And we're
right?
not supposed to see that. That's not.
We're not. We're not. And so, that those policies need to change.
Hmm. I
Um,
never even thought about that. That is such a good point.
yeah.
And I hope that they heard him because I honestly, I never even thought about that. But as soon as you started going down that road, I thought I knew exactly where you were going, but
Yeah.
I didn't think about it without you helping me with that story.
Yeah. I mean, it was incredible having this conversation with this
Mm-hmm.
gentleman because you know, he was so honest. He was
Mm-hmm.
so transparent about, this is what I would have done, and he says, honestly, Susan, I have some friends that were in the military that are police officers, and they're great officers. Why? Because when they got home, they got help. When
Uh,
they got home, they sought therapy for their PTSD. They worked through their emotions, right? they have the tools that
Mm-hmm.
most don't. And so it allows them to make better choices
Sure.
in different, scenarios. And he said, but there's a lot that don't. And that's the unfortunate part.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, it's and then I think back to, Denny, right? And here he is, a 30-year veteran who have seen all kinds of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
who is almost murdered, and he finds forgiveness for
Yeah.
his assailant.
Mm-hmm.
And he recognizes that, the fact that he himself had never sought a therapist to work through all of the things that he saw on a daily basis,
Mm-hmm.
you know, he realized he spent all those years struggling mentally, which put pressure on the relationships around him
Yep.
and maybe some of the choices he's made, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was totally transparent as well.
It's a lot of self-awareness with both those men.
It is totally. And I was humbled by having both
Mm-hmm.
conversations
Oh
with
yeah.
these guys. Um, but again, that goes back to being vulnerable
Mm-hmm.
and I really feel that you're very brave. You're brave. That's what I hear now. Like, oh, you're so brave because you were able to tell your story and be authentic about it and
Mm-hmm.
put it all out there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yes. And I am very grateful that I had the support system later in life
Yeah.
to help me to be able to do that and to be brave
Mm-hmm.
and to continue to be brave.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I think that is the most important thing, is to understand that you're human and,
Yeah.
humans hurt. They get hurt, and there's nothing weak about working through your hurt and your pain.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing,
Right. And don't, yeah, because what we've been trained to do is to stuff those emotions down.
right?
And we need to, and I'm going through that myself where I'm allowing myself to feel the emotions. It's not fun. I don't like it.
No, it's
I
not.
mean, I used to have this mindset of, oh, if I start crying, I won't stop,
Yep,
and I do. And I
that's
don't,
fear.
it is, because honestly, I hate crying.
Yep.
I hate crying. But, it's like there was a situation a few weeks ago and I felt the emotions coming up and I
Hmm.
actually was like, oh no, I don't want to feel this. And so I started stuffing him down and I realized what I was doing. Like it was one of those things where everything kind of slowed down and I saw what I was doing.
Yep.
I'm like, nope, I got to feel this. I just have to feel it. And so on and off all day long, I would cry.
Uh-huh.
And I just warned my husband though, because the first time he saw me cry, of course, he came up and he hugged me and I said, honey, I
Right.
just need to feel this. I just need to
Yep.
feel this. I'm okay.
Yeah.
I have to feel this. And it's so interesting because automatically, without being present, I shut it down.
Yep.
I have to make myself present the whole time, or it's like this automatic little switch in my mind that just, nope, we're going to shut that down.
Yep. Well, and that's for everything. I mean, that's that feeling of not being in control,
Correct.
right?
Right.
And it's a fear,
It
right?
is. It
And
is.
and I had that, I had that where, I had days when I was in my healing journey where I was like terrified that once I started that process that I would not be able to come out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And actually my husband would feel that way too. So for instance, um anytime there was a school shooting or a shooting of
Mm.
any sort, um he would tell me, like, don't get on your computer, don't look at your phone, don't turn on the TV. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Because he knew, right? He
yeah.
knew that those kind of things, like I said, I hate this word, but these
Trigger.
things would trigger me. And
Mm-hmm.
and he too would have that mentality of, oh my God, I don't want to lose her. Right? He's already seen it. He saw
Mm,
it, you know, he saw it in
yeah.
99 and he didn't want it, he didn't want that again.
Mm-hmm.
So for him, it was fear as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I had to be, totally, completely transparent with him and say, look, I know you're scared. I understand that, but I need to feel what I need to feel, and I can't run from it. I mean, for God's sake, anytime there's anything in the news, it's all over the place. You cannot
Yeah.
get away from it, you know? And like even when Newtown happened and the kids were killed in the East Coast, um, I told him, I said, I can't get away from this. It's all over my computer and I'm
Mm-hmm.
working on my computer and
Mm-hmm.
I can't get away from this. So I need you to know that I just need to feel how I'm feeling so that I can move through this.
Mm-hmm. You have to learn to manage it
Yeah.
instead of avoid it.
Yeah. I mean, everything like, and the other side of that is like the Aurora shootings would happened in, the theater shootings and
Yeah.
people would automatically call me. They would automatically send me
Interesting.
messages. They would be like, "Are you okay?"
Oh, yeah.
People would check in with me,
Mm-hmm.
and I would go through a bout where I would get irritated about it.
Yeah,
Just like,
yeah, I get that.
I
I
really
know.
don't, it's like I don't want to talk about this. Like
Right. Let me
but
manage it, please. Let me
but
work through this.
I get it. People
Yeah,
just want to make sure that I was okay,
they
which
care.
they cared, and so I had to step back and
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge that.
Mm-hmm.
However, when Uvalde happened, it- my husband immediately, I was out and about, and he's like, "Do not get on your phone. Like, do not get on your computer. Do not do something today, Susan, that is away from any of the media, please." And then I had my daughter-in-law with me, and she's like, "I got to see what's going on, and I'll tell you what, whether you should know or not." And she got on her phone and she's like, "Yep, nope, we're going to go do something. We're going to,
Oh.
and she's been through trauma herself. She gets it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we were doing her hair that day. So I'm like, let's just do your hair. We'll turn on a movie, right? We'll watch a
Mm-hmm.
movie and do your hair. And, and I did that, I did whatever it was that I felt that was healthy for
Mm-hmm.
me.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
when the shooting happened and the officer was killed up in Boulder, Colorado a few years ago. I really didn't pay attention to all of it right away. I didn't even know a police officer had been killed right away. I didn't learn it until the next day. And then it broke my heart because he was a father and he was around the same age as my dad.
Mm.
And it broke my heart only for the fact that I don't want other families to be in this group, this
Yeah.
club.
To have to live with what you guys live with.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I just that's what breaks my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And they had the funeral that week. It was right before Easter. And I didn't watch the funeral. It was televised.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't watch the funeral. I didn't pay attention. Not that I didn't care. I needed to do what was healthy for me.
Correct. Right.
And I had a gathering at Easter that week, Easter, I had some clients come who were from Southern California. So my mom was there. She started a conversation with them and immediately told them who she was. Like, I'm the widow, blah, 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 blah. And they already knew, because I had told them about my book.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom talked to me and she said, "Did you see the funeral?" And I said, "No." She's like, "Oh, I watched the whole thing." And I said, "Well, I didn't." She's like, "Why didn't you?" I said, "'Cause Mom, that's not the healthy way to live your life."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So she just proceeded to tell me everything that was going on at the funeral. And I was like, you know what? I really don't need to know that. Right. And then we got through Easter, whatever. And I was at the grocery store, same grocery store chain that this whole shooting happened at,
Mm-hmm.
King Supers. I was at our local one, which is nowhere near the Boulder one. And they had a board up with all of the faces of the victims, including the police officer. And they were taking donations for the family or whatever. And I went in there, I got my basket, I looked at it, I kept going. I didn't have any kind of initial thought around it or whatever, but what I started to feel was the anxiety starting to creep up on me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the aisle and I had a full-fledged panic attack. And all I could think about was getting out of that store. And people
Mm-hmm.
were looking at me like I was going to start shooting up the place because
Oh,
I had that look on my face where I just felt like I was out of control.
you're
So they probably
frantic.
thought I
Yeah.
was crazy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I paid for my stuff. Like, I don't even remember what I got. I ran out of there and I went into my car. And before I even started the car, I started to do my breathing techniques.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to ground myself into a better state in order to drive home.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started thinking, why did that happen?
Mm-hmm.
Why did that happen? And what I realized was it was the security part of it. I felt anxious because this shooting happened in a grocery store.
And you were in a grocery
I
store.
was in a grocery store and I felt less secure.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a trigger for me,
Mm-hmm.
which caused me to spiral.
Mm-hmm.
And I got home and I told my husband without getting all anxious again. And he said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm okay." I was able to calm myself and reground myself and everything. Now, in the past, I would have done exactly what you did. I would have fought it.
Mm-hmm.
I would have
Stuff
fought
it
it
down.
and stuffed it and fought it and fought it
Mm-hmm.
and fought it. And it wouldn't have gone. I tell people all the time, don't fight your anxiety attacks because when you do, they just last longer.
Mm-hmm.
Or you start to feel better and then one starts swelling up again.
Mm-hmm.
And you just have multiple panic attacks one
Mm-hmm.
after another. Who wants to have that?
Yeah.
So, when you are having anxiety, you got to tell yourself, this isn't going to kill me, right? I'm not going to
I'm
die.
safe.
I'm safe. My body is just having a visceral reaction
Mm-hmm.
to something. And if you have a tool that you use it.
Mm-hmm.
Find something that grounds you,
Right.
that'll pull you out of that state. So, yeah, so that was, and that wasn't that long ago,
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, this is a great example of it is a healing journey and
It
we can
is.
still get triggered, but
Absolutely.
the empowering thing is you took the time, first of all, you recognized that you were having a panic attack. You recognized there was something going on, and
Yep.
you got yourself in a safe situation.
Yep.
You use the breathing, which I use breathing too. It's huge, breathing
Yep.
techniques. And then you ask the great question, why did that happen?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, because I talk about this a lot on my podcast, rather than being judgmental with yourself, be
Mm-hmm.
curious. Instead of being hard on yourself, oh, I can't believe I did that. I could have made
Right.
a fool out of myself or whatever. It's like, why did that happen? And it does kind of catch you off guard when you've gone through a lot of the healing that
Yeah.
we've gone through, and we have had a great measure of healing. And so when that does happen, it's unnerving, but it should prompt that very question of, okay, why did this happen? And let me dive deep here.
Exactly.
And I had a trigger, and I talked about it on my podcast a few months ago, and that's exactly what I did. Is I took it from beginning to end, and I
Mm-hmm.
could watch the whole thing almost as though I was like standing outside of myself watching it.
Yep.
And I was able to understand the whole thing, and even got to the root of why I was
Mm-hmm.
triggered. And it was so empowering.
Yes, it is. Because again, it comes back to control.
Correct.
So you have some control over what happens
Right. You do.
when you're triggered. Whereas before, if you didn't have those tools, then you felt out of control.
Right. You felt
felt
completely
crazy.
helpless. Yeah. And helpless.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
and I would even get to the point where I would stand back and I would see the cycle. I would see it going on, and yet I still didn't know what to do.
Yep.
I still did the
Absolutely.
same thing over and over. And
Yep.
I didn't see at the time that there were choices before me. And you were mentioning that earlier, that we have choices, but when you are not in the self-awareness and you aren't getting into what's going on, you aren't going to know what's triggering you, and
Exactly.
you are going to be out of control.
Exactly. And it's important. And it goes back to the whole, and I hate saying PTSD. I hate the D. I hate the disorder thing
Because that
because
sounds permanent.
it just sounds, there's just such a negative connotation to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just post trauma. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's post trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone can have it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it goes back to the fact that no matter what, I am always going to have post trauma. The
Mm-hmm.
difference is that I know how to manage
Mm-hmm.
when these things come up. I know what to do for myself. I know
Mm-hmm.
how to ground myself back where
Mm-hmm.
I needed to be, where I need to be, where I feel safe.
Right.
And so, you know, in that, I feel like I have more control
Mm-hmm.
over it, rather it having control over me.
Correct. Right. Exactly. This has been so powerful. And thank you so much for sharing your story, and most importantly, your story of healing and what you've gone through. And it's not a perfect journey. It's not an easy journey, but it is a journey, and it does get better. And you do learn, like we were just talking about, you do learn how to manage this, and it doesn't manage you anymore, and it doesn't
Right.
have the power over you. And you can take your power back so that you can manage this stuff, and in some cases control these things in your life.
Yep. Absolutely. 100%. So if you feel like that, if if you're out there and you're listening and you're going, oh my gosh, that's me.
Yeah.
That's me. Like, take the baby step, right? The first thing to do is to find yourself a professional that one, well, here's a biggie. That professional, whatever it is, whatever trauma you've gone through, whatever has happened, that you find the professional that knows how to move you through that.
Mm-hmm. Somebody who specializes in trauma
Somebody
and
that
mm-hmm.
specializes in whatever it is that you
Mm-hmm.
have gone through. That's really important.
That's a good
Right?
point. Yeah.
And make sure that you have a connection to that person. You'll know. You'll know within the first 5 minutes if you connect with that person or not.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, move on.
Exactly.
There's no shame in it. There's not.
Mm-mm.
It's your life, it's your healing, and it's your investment
Mm-hmm.
in yourself. So interview your therapist, make sure that they're able and capable to move you through whatever trauma that you've gone through. And then do the work.
Do the work. Do the work. Yeah, dig in. It's not always bad.
Nope.
But as I have said before, it's kind of like spring cleaning. It's going to get really messy and really uncomfortable before it gets better. But
Absolutely.
it does get better. It does get
Absolutely.
better.
Yep. And then if anybody wants to read my book,
Yes.
it is on Amazon. It's called The Other Side of the Gun, My Journey from Trauma to Resiliency. It is in paperback form, or it is on Kindle. If you are on Kindle Unlimited, you can read my book for free. And, please give me reviews.
Yes. Yes.
If you want to contact me and have a conversation of any sort, I have a website. It's susansnowspeaks.com. It has information on my book on there as well, but feel free to reach out, and I am doing live coaching. It's actually resiliency live coaching. And so if you need to talk to anyone, or maybe you have questions for me, feel free to reach out.
Thank you. And we'll have all that as well, available for all the listeners as well. So, well, thank you so much. This has been great. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I think this was a fantastic, very important conversation.
Very important on so many levels.
Yes.
Well, thank you.